I suppose every story has a beginning, though mine feels less like a beginning and more like a long echo, something that had been whispering inside my life for years before I ever learned to hear it. But if I had to choose a place to start, I would begin with a morning that looked so peaceful, so ordinary, that no one could have guessed what was coming. That morning, the house smelled of warm tea and old wood. Sunlight rested quietly on the dining table, the way a tired friend leans on your shoulder. I remember listening to the ticking of the clock on the wall, that slow, steady tick I had heard for decades. It was strange how comforting it felt, strange how final it would feel later. I was an old man by then, not ancient, just old enough to walk slower, think slower, and appreciate silence more than conversation. My name doesn't matter. My age doesn't matter either. All that really matters is that I was a father, and I believed, perhaps too faithfully, that I had done my job well. My son, Aram, lived just 40 minutes away. He used to visit more often, back when life was simpler, and he still looked at me the way a young tree looks at the older one standing beside it. But time reshapes people. It reshapes love, too. Sometimes it sharpens it. Sometimes it dulls it to a fragile thread. I had not seen him in 3 weeks. And that morning, as I poured my tea, I felt something tighten inside my chest, not pain, not worry, just a quiet ache, the kind an old parent feels when they wait for a door that no longer opens as often as it should. I had spent my life building things, a small transport business, a modest home, a reputation for honesty, something I treasured more than any property document. But the world changes, and the young don't always want what the old spent their lives creating. Still, I believed my son respected me, in his own hurried, modern way. I believed that until the afternoon when he and his wife came to my house. I remember the sound of their car pulling in a sharp sound, too fast for the narrow street. I stood at the window, swallowing a strange feeling I couldn't name. Her laughter reached me even before their footsteps, light, careless, floating through the air like a feather that didn't care where it landed. Aram didn't laugh. He walked ahead of her with a face carved from impatience. He was 31, but in that moment he looked older not from age, but from choices. I opened the door before he could knock. "You could have waited inside," he said, not looking at me fully. I smiled, the soft kind, the kind fathers used to hide the sting. "I wanted to greet you." His wife brushed past me without lowering her sunglasses. "The house smells old," she muttered. I didn't answer. Age teaches you that not every comment deserves a reply. We sat in the living room, and I realized something was different. They didn't come for tea. They didn't come for conversation. They came with purpose, and purpose rarely mixes with kindness. Aram leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the way he used to sit when he was about to confess something as a child. Except this time his eyes were cold. "Dad," he said, "we need to make some decisions, important ones." His wife lifted her phone and smirked at something on the screen. I felt the room grow smaller. "What decisions?" I asked. He sighed, as if speaking to me was a burden. "The house, the business, everything. It's time to move things to my name. Lawyers said it's easier to handle while you're still, still around." I looked at him for a long moment, and memories flooded me the day I taught him how to use a wrench, his small hands trembling. The night he fell sick and I stayed awake, cooling his forehead with wet cloth. The years I bent my back so he wouldn't have to bend his, and now he wanted everything, not after I died, now, while I was still breathing. "Aram," I said softly, "these things, they're not just assets. They're a dad, don't start that emotional nonsense." His voice cracked like a whip. His wife snorted. "See, I told you he'd make it dramatic." Her laughter cut through the room like thin ice breaking. I swallowed. My heart didn't break, not yet, but it shifted. Something inside me quietly changed shape. "You want me to transfer everything now?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "It's practical. We'll take care of things." I nodded slowly, letting the truth settle into my bones. "So that's why you came." "That's why we came," he confirmed. A silence stretched across the room, long, heavy, suffocating. Then the moment happened, the moment that would end whatever remained of the man I used to be. He stood up, walked closer, and when I whispered, "I thought you came to see me, not my property," he spat. Right on my shirt, a small, wet mark on old cotton. His wife burst into laughter, loud, cruel, echoing off the walls like broken glass. I didn't move for a moment, not because I was shocked, but because I had never imagined I would live long enough to see my child become a stranger. I stepped back, slow, quiet. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't even wipe the spit from my shirt. I simply looked at him, really looked, and saw a man I didn't recognize. Then I turned around, walked to my room, picked up my old leather bag, and without a word, I left my own house. Behind me, their laughter faded into the distance. But another sound took its place, the sound of my heart, settling into a new kind of silence. A silence that would change everything. A silence that would empty their life. When I stepped out of that house, it felt like the whole neighborhood froze, not in a dramatic way, just quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in your bones before your mind can catch up. The sun was hanging low, brushing the street in that soft late afternoon gold. A couple of birds hopped along a telephone wire. A dog somewhere down the block barked once, and then got tired of its own noise. If anyone were watching, they'd think I was just an old man heading out for a slow walk. Nobody would guess I just walked out of my own life. I held nothing but a small worn leather bag, same bag I used back when I hustled my way into the transport business. Piece by piece, mile by mile. That bag had seen more sunrises than my son had seen responsibilities, and it was lighter than ever now. I walked down the sidewalk, half expecting to hear the door behind me swing open, to hear Aram call out to me even a simple "Dad, wait." But the street stayed quiet. No footsteps, no apology, not even a guilty look tossed my way, just that empty, hollow kind of silence that feels heavier than words, and somewhere between the porch and that corner mailbox, something inside me. Settled, not anger, not heartbreak, just truth, a plain, cold truth that maybe I'd been dodging for years. Love doesn't fail all at once. It fades in slow, quiet inches, and you only notice when you're standing in the leftovers. I kept walking. When I reached the end of the block, the air shifted, smelled like rain was thinking about showing up. I've always believed that rain likes old men. Maybe it sees us better than people do. Old Kareem, my neighbor for half a lifetime, was standing outside, leaning on his gate like he always did. He squinted at me. "Out for a walk, buddy." I nodded, couldn't trust my voice yet. Words felt too heavy to carry. He laughed softly, like he knew something without knowing anything. "All right, take care of those knees. Weather's changing." If he had any idea what I just walked away from, but he didn't, so I just kept moving. The bus stop wasn't far. I sat down on one of those wooden benches that creaks every time a breeze looks at it wrong. Nearby, a bunch of kids were running around, shouting like the world belonged to them. Funny thing, their laughter hit me like déjà vu. I could almost hear Uram at that age, calling out for me with those small hands waving in the air. "Dad, look at me." I used to scoop him up and promise him he'd grow up to be a good man. Maybe that was on me. Maybe I shouldn't have assumed goodness was hereditary. One kid ran too fast and nearly bumped into me. He stopped. "Why?" "Died. Sorry, sir, my bad." I smiled, patting his shoulder. "You're all right, kiddo." And in that tiny moment, I felt it. It's not the world that hurt me. It's only ever the people you pour yourself into who get close enough to break something. A bus pulled up with a soft hiss. I didn't even check where it was going. I climbed in and took the last seat, the one people choose when they want to disappear for a while. The city rolled past the windows, gas stations, tired old shops, neon signs trying too hard. And the reflection in the glass showed me a man who looked worn out, not from age, but from trying to be enough for someone who stopped caring. I looked down at my hands, hands that built a business from scratch. Hands that tied my son's shoelaces. Hands that signed every check and every sacrifice. Hands that didn't even rise in defense when my own son spat on me. The bus rattled over a pothole, but it didn't shake the thought that had finally found its way into me. By the time the bus reached the last station, the truth was fully formed. I stepped off, walked toward a quiet corner under a tall old tree. The air was cool, the way evenings get when they're trying to comfort you without asking questions. And I said it to myself, soft, clear, unshakable. They want my life, fine, they can have it, every inch of it. I'm done handing out pieces of myself to people who don't even look me in the eye. I wasn't just leaving that house. I was stepping away from the version of me they'd taken for granted. And here's the thing about old men people underestimate. When we finally walk away, we don't come back the same. Sometimes we don't come back at all. Meanwhile, miles away, my son and his wife were probably still laughing, probably checking drawers, probably planning colors for rooms. They had no idea what kind of storm they had set in motion, because when a father decides to empty someone's life, he doesn't do it with noise. He does it with silence, and silence is the one thing nobody sees coming. I didn't go far that evening, just far enough to feel like the world had stopped touching me. The bus station wasn't crowded a handful of travelers, a couple arguing softly near the vending machine, a man with a suitcase too small for the amount of sadness in his eyes. Life has a way of gathering the tired in the same corners. I picked a bench near the end of the platform and sat down. The wood was rough, but it felt honest. Honesty was something I hadn't felt in hours. The sky above me slowly turned from orange to that deep navy blue that feels like a blanket being pulled across the world. Streetlights flickered to life one by one. The distant rumble of trucks drifted across the highway like a slow heartbeat. I pulled my bag closer. Inside it were a few old photos, a couple of documents I kept just in case, and a sweater my late wife knitted 20 years ago. It still smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite scent. She used to tuck lavender sachets in every drawer, said it made the house feel alive. Funny how I never imagined I'd leave that house behind. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the wind settle around me. And that's when the memories began crawling out of the shadows, not the loud ones, not the dramatic ones, but the small, quiet memories, the ones that hurt the most. I remembered Aram when he was 8, waiting by the school gate, holding a painting he had made. A messy one, all crooked colors and shaky lines, but his eyes were glowing with pride. "You think Mom will like it, Dad? She'll love it." I told him. I remember that day perfectly, the smell of fresh paint, the sun on his face, the way he slipped his small hand into mine, as if I was the only anchor he knew. Where does that kind of love go? How does it change shape into something sharp enough to wound the very hands that raised it? People say time heals everything. I've lived long enough to know that's not true. Time just teaches you to walk around the holes. A train horn blew somewhere in the distance, snapping me back to the present. I opened my eyes slowly and sighed. It was getting colder. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A small, soft buzz, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, but still steals your peace. I pulled it out. "One missed call, my son. No message. No sorry, Dad. No come home. Just a call, maybe accidental, maybe intentional, but it didn't matter. The damage was done long before he spat on me. The damage came in the years where conversations got shorter, where visits got rarer, where my presence slowly became an obligation instead of a comfort. And maybe he had been preparing for this moment longer than I realized. I slipped the phone back in my pocket and leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Somewhere behind me, a young woman was talking loudly on her phone, her voice rising between laughter and frustration. "No, girl, listen, if my man ever talked to me like that, I'd walk right out the door. I don't care who he is." I almost smiled. Almost walking out of a house is easy. Walking out of your own life, leaving behind everything you built, that's a different kind of courage. Or maybe just a different kind of heartbreak. A few hours passed before I made my next move. I walked to a small motel just down the road, the kind of place where the carpet never fully dries, and the reception desk looks like it's seen too many midnights. The clerk looked up from his magazine. "Need a room, sir. Just for the night. You traveling." I hesitated, then shook my head. Something like that. He didn't press, good man. People who work night shifts learn not to ask questions they don't want the answers to. The room was nothing fancy, a creaky bed, a buzzing light, a thin blanket, but it was mine for the night. And after the day I had, ownership of anything felt like a blessing. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my hands rest in my lap. Silence wrapped around me again, a different silence this time, not the silence of shock, but the silence that sits right before a decision, because I knew I couldn't stay in that motel. I couldn't just hide. I had to decide what emptying their life truly meant. It didn't mean revenge. Revenge is noisy, immature, short-lived, no. What I had in mind was quieter, more permanent, something a man only chooses once in his lifetime. I opened my bag, took out my old business documents, land papers, company registrations, bank files, things my son never bothered to ask about, not until he wanted them. I laid them out on the bed carefully, like a surgeon preparing tools. And for the first time that day, I felt something close to strength return to me, because these papers, this legacy, it wasn't theirs. It wasn't his wife's. It wasn't even my son's. It was mine, built with my sweat, my time, my youth. And what's built with love and sacrifice can't be claimed with spit and entitlement. I leaned back slowly, and a quiet, steady thought settled in my chest. They think they emptied me today, tomorrow. They'll learn what empty really means. But before I could execute anything, before the morning came, something unexpected happened, something that shifted the road ahead in a way I did not see coming. Something or someone from my past found me that night, a knock on the motel door. Soft, gentle, yet familiar, I froze. No one knew I was here. No one but that voice. That whisper through the door. Sir, is that really you? I hadn't heard that voice in years. Not since the day everything changed. And when I opened the door, my past walked in. The door creaked open, and there she was. Not a ghost, not a memory, not a figment of my imagination, just her. Standing in the doorway like she had a place in my life I'd somehow forgotten to lock. Maria. My old business partner, my friend, the one who had stuck by me when everyone else turned away. Her hair was streaked with gray now, her eyes a little softer, but the way she looked at me. It hit me the same way it did 20 years ago. With respect, with understanding, with something that my son and his wife had forgotten existed. Dad, I said, and even in my own voice, there was a flicker of surprise. She smiled gently. Not exactly Dad this time, but you look like you could use company. I hesitated. The motel room felt smaller all of a sudden. The bag on the bed, my old life, my decisions, the things I was about to do, all of it suddenly seemed less urgent, not irrelevant, just lighter. I didn't expect anyone to find me here, I said. I wasn't really looking for you, she replied. I was looking for something else, and I found you instead. Her words were calm, but they carried weight, like a hand pressing against the side of my chest. I realized then that what I had planned, the quiet dismantling of everything my son thought he could claim, wasn't the only choice. Maybe the choice wasn't revenge at all. Maybe the choice was something I hadn't thought of, because the world had taught me to protect my pride first, and my heart second. She pulled up a chair and sat without asking. I watched her, the way her hands rested lightly on her knees, the way she didn't judge, didn't demand, didn't lecture. I hadn't realized how much I had missed that. I heard about him. She said softly, Aram, I didn't know he had. Well, you know. I nodded. He crossed a line, something I never thought I'd see in him. Maria didn't flinch. Didn't gasp. She simply nodded, as if understanding that life sometimes throws its hardest punches exactly at the people who gave the most. I'm sorry. I said quietly, I should have. I don't know. Stopped it somehow. You did what you had to do, she replied. Her voice was like water flowing over stone, gentle, patient, unyielding. You walked away. You didn't lower yourself. That's all any man can do when the ones he loves decide they don't deserve him. I stared at the wall, thinking about the house I left behind. The laughter of his wife still ringing in my ears, the spit, that moment when I realized the son I raised had already left me, and now here was Maria offering me something else, something quieter. Something human. She leaned back and tapped the edge of the table. I didn't come here to lecture you. I came here because I remembered what it feels like to build something with your hands, with your sweat, and then to feel it slipping away not because it failed, but because the people you trusted didn't know how to care for it. Her words cut deeper than any anger I could feel, because she wasn't angry. She was just stating truth, plain, undeniable truth. I realized then that emptying their life, my son's and his wife's, didn't have to be about money. It didn't have to be about revenge. It could be something far quieter, far more powerful, and maybe that's when I knew what I would do. I would let them take the house. I would let them take the business. But I would not give them my peace. I would not give them my dignity. I would not give them my legacy of love, patience, and quiet wisdom, because some things can't be handed over. Some things have to be kept alive inside you, even if the people you once loved don't recognize their value. Maria got up to leave. She paused at the door and looked back at me. Whatever you decide, don't let anger guide you. That's the trap. Walk away clean, and they'll feel the weight of what they threw away. Trust me. And just like that, she was gone. I sat there for a long while, staring at the papers spread across the bed. Contracts, accounts, ownership, documents, all the pieces of my life that Aram thought he could claim with a smile and a couple of signatures. I picked up one sheet, smelled it, felt the paper between my fingers, and then I whispered, "Let's see what silence can do." Because now the game had changed, not mine against theirs, mine against what they thought they deserved. And in the quiet of that motel room, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, something steadier than anger, stronger than betrayal, the slow, quiet, unshakable pulse of control, control over my own story. Control over the life I built, control over the way they would remember me, and maybe, just maybe, control over the lesson they were about to learn. The motel room was still, except for the faint hum of the old fridge in the corner. Outside, the first hint of light was brushing the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and grays. It was the kind of morning that feels like a promise that today everything could shift. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the papers laid out before me, the house deeds, the business accounts, the contracts signed decades ago with my own hand. Aram had believed ownership meant power, ownership meant control, but he didn't understand the quiet parts of life, the things you can't sign over or steal, respect, dignity, legacy. I sipped a cup of coffee I'd made in the tiny motel kettle. Bitter, strong, honest, the kind that clears your head and wakes you to what you really want. And I knew in that slow, certain way that what I wanted wasn't rage, it wasn't shouting, it wasn't turning their world upside down with loud, childish revenge. It was silence, it was absence, it was letting the weight of their choices settle on them without me ever raising a hand. I packed the documents carefully back into the leather bag, each fold, each stack deliberate. I imagined Aram's face when he realized the true meaning of losing something you don't even understand. I left a note for the motel clerk, simple, thanks, quiet place, helped me think, no need for explanations. He wouldn't ask. I drove back to the city in the early morning fog. The streets were quiet. Coffee shops were just opening, neon signs flickering. A cool breeze slipped through the open window, carrying the smell of wet pavement and possibilities. By the time I reached my son's street, the house looked exactly the same lawn, same windows catching the sunlight, but I saw it differently now. The home wasn't theirs yet, not truly. It was mine. In memory, in spirit, and they had no idea how far they'd overstepped. I didn't walk in, I didn't knock, I didn't speak. I simply left the leather bag on the porch. Nothing else, no note, no explanation. Just the bag, inside it, every legal document they thought gave them power. Every signature, every deed, every contract, all accounted for, all mine. The door closed behind me as I walked away, and then I watched. From a distance, quietly, patiently, hours passed, their confusion, their panic, the laughter I remembered replaced by harsh words, a door slamming, voices raised, pleading, yelling, accusations. I didn't interfere. I didn't call, I didn't explain, because this wasn't about punishment. It was about reality, the reality that comes when people assume they own something and find out they never did. By evening, I was back at my motel. Same room, same quiet, same soft hum of the fridge. I poured another cup of coffee and watched the sunset paint the sky with quiet, muted colors. I thought about Aram. I thought about his wife. I thought about the years I spent building a life they believed they could claim. And then I realized I didn't feel the anger I expected. Not really. I felt calm, steady, complete. They had been given everything they wanted, and still they couldn't handle it. Some lessons don't require yelling. Some truths don't need to be explained. I smiled quietly to myself, because I had given them a gift they would never recognize. Freedom. Freedom from my presence. Freedom from my legacy. And maybe in the quietest way possible. That was the most powerful thing I could have done. The next morning, I didn't go back to the house. I didn't need to. From a distance, I watched the chaos unfold. Aram pacing the lawn, his wife flipping through the papers, her laughter gone, replaced by sharp, clipped tones. They argued over numbers, contracts, signatures, the very things they had once thought were their birthright. And yet, no matter how loud their voices became, no one could reach me. I was not there. I was free. For a long time, I simply sat on a park bench down the street, the sun warming my back, the wind carrying the faint smell of autumn leaves, children laughing in the distance, dogs barking, life moving, stubborn and indifferent as it always does. And I thought about the years I had spent building everything for them. The nights I stayed awake with their childhood fears, the mornings I rose before the sun to make sure they never wanted for anything, the hours of worry I carried silently on my shoulders. I realized something important. It wasn't about the house, it wasn't about the business, it wasn't even about money, it was about respect. It was about love returned in some way anyway, and when that doesn't happen, the greatest gift you can give for yourself and for them is to walk away with your head held high. I didn't feel the rage I expected, not even the bitterness. I felt something far stronger, clarity, because they had shown me who they truly were, and in showing me, they had given me exactly what I needed. Peace. Weeks later, I still think about that day, about the way the wind felt on my face as I left the house, about the quiet smile I carried while they scrambled inside, convinced they had the upper hand. And I think about the lesson they will carry forever, whether they understand it or not. Entitlement has its limits. Respect is not automatic, and what is earned with love and sweat cannot simply be taken by laughter or greed. I sip my coffee in the mornings now, the smell of lavender lingering faintly in the air from the sachets my wife left behind. I watch the world move around me calm, and I smile quietly because I know I did the right thing. I didn't destroy them. I didn't yell or strike or beg. I simply stepped back, left quietly, and let life teach its own lesson. And maybe that's the truth we all need to remember. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not to take. It is to release, to step away with dignity, to let silence speak louder than words. We spend half our lives chasing what we think we need, and sometimes the other half comes quietly, teaching us that peace is not given. It is taken by walking away, and maybe, in the end, love isn't about keeping people. It's about remembering them kindly and letting the rest go.